Welcome to Crushgasm, the podcast dedicated to the highs and lows of crushes from their first to their worst. We're going to cover them all with a cascade of characters, including our guest today, the awesomeness, Beth Connor, a public speaker, mother of 7, and HR professional who is here to talk not only about love-centered life, but also her nice guy crush on one of the sweetest people in Hollywood, none other than Tom Hanks. Beth, how are you?
I'm so well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk Tom Hanks. He doesn't get enough love in this world, in the crush realm.
I agree.
I mean, everyone loves him, but who crushes on him, you know? But I'm happy you're here to talk about it. But before we get into it, can you tell people where they can find you online?
Sure. You can find me on TikTok at stream of 1000 things. The 1000 is 1000. And you can find me on Facebook at Love Centered Life.
Alrighty, well, we'll find you there. And so we're going to start this off by going back to the start of the 90s when you watched Big. Now, why did you crush on Tom Hanks and not David Moscow, he was the actor that played the young Josh Baskin? Like, why were you into older Josh Baskin?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. I don't think I ever looked at younger kids. Like, I never had a crush in school. All of my, even all the way up until high school, the people I was attracted to were always older. I think I don't see them as potential anything, maybe.
Interesting. You never had a crush at school?
Not with anybody. I like one kid in school, I think, who was my age. And maybe that was the problem because that crush went really badly.
Oh, that'll do it.
You guys are stupid. I'm just gonna crush on people I have no access to.
So have you always been like a celebrity crusher?
Not at all.
Oh.
No.
Just Tom Hanks.
I'm so funny. When I look at like to buy a house or something, I hate cookie cutter houses. I'm always looking for something that's quirky and unique and fun. And I think Tom Hanks, especially with like Big, was just so quirky and so fun and so playful that it was just really appealing to that part of my nature.
Yeah, that's what I think when I think of Tom Hanks and Big. The whole point is like he's physically this grown man, but at heart he is still just a kid, and that does play into the quirky, the unique, and the fun. Do you think that idea of that like big kid energy ingrained itself in the back of your mind? So like any crushes that followed, you would be like, they have to be playful, youthful personality, like Josh Baskin.
No, actually, kind of for me, I almost went too serious in life. And I feel like that was more like a foundation to look back on and say, oh, Beth, you can absolutely have the playful person in your life. I've been married 3 times and I have just these beautiful kids and stuff, but all of my marriages failed. And I look back and I'm like, well, maybe I was just because I was kind of taking things too seriously. So when you and I started talking about this particular topic and like who I had crushes on, I look back now and I think maybe what it was is that I felt like I wasn't, it sounds kind of going deeper, but almost like I wasn't worthy of somebody that was that fun, but still down to earth and real and capable. And so I was just going for these really like serious type people who were just not fun. They weren't loving. They weren't playful. They weren't anything that would inspire that girl from back then, that heart,
Mm-hmm.
No, I didn't have healthy relationships. I'll just so maybe part of that was finding crushing on somebody who could like create that idea in my head that that's what it should be like, and that fun playfulness.
This also makes me think of talking to Mallory Kirsten. We talked to her about her Tiger Beat crush, which was Zach Hansen, the youngest Hansen brother from the group Hansen, Mbop.
Yes.
We got into how sometimes a crush can represent what you want to express in yourself, but maybe are afraid to. So maybe you said that you were crushing on these like super serious, or you ended up with super serious people. It's like maybe you were scared to take that chance in being playful.
I think that's a really legitimate description of that. Yeah, I can totally see that.
Because you also noted you liked Martin Short in Three Amigos,
Oh, yeah.
and that's another super kind of like childlike wonder type person like Josh Baskin. So just an interesting thought.
Yeah, but I mean, looking at their personalities, looking at their faces, like they're funny faces. They're not this standard. I never like Josh Duhamel and Henry Cavill. I just never looked at them and was like, oh, I want that so much. I never felt that way with these perfect faces. But if they have a character that's playing something really fun and playful, I am totally attracted to that. And I don't think that we're really inclined to be as attracted to physicality as women. I think we're more attracted to a behavior pattern, and that makes us find the physical more attractive.
For sure, for sure. Like, I love Bill Hader. That guy's not, like you said, he's not gonna win like the sexiest man of the year cover. He might be in the he might be in People, he might be in the issue, but he's never gonna be the cover like, what, Adam Levine and John Legend and all
Yes.
this. But to me, he's better looking than all of them because he's so funny.
Yes. And it's also why I refuse to ever meet the people that whose characters I like. I want to know them exactly how they are in that show. Like I want to just, it's kind of like, when somebody passes away and they're, they have a long-term disease or something that's making them look worse before they're like, no, I want you to remember me how I was. Like, don't come and see me the way I look now. But then I feel the same way about certain actors where I'm just like, I don't want to know that you're not as nice in person.
Oh yeah, it can be I lived in LA for what, 16 years, so like, and I would go to like Jimmy Kimmel and try to meet people, and it is really heartbreaking when your love of your life's not as nice. You're like, oh, yeah. And you have this sort of vendetta the rest of your like, they're mean to me that one time, now I can't like that movie anymore. Screw them.
Yeah. Well, I love the I think it was 2005 version of Pride and Prejudice with Keira Knightley. And I absolutely loved it. There were a couple of little quirky things that kind of irritated me, but I still will watch it, but I have to go into it knowing I'm going to be really bugged, because what I did is I watched the director's commentary and I hated like there things they said. I'm like, no, that's so anachronistic. That does that's wrong. What's wrong with you that you did this? So I don't even watch director's commentaries on movies that I like anymore, because that really ruined it.
I mean, do they still do them? DVDs are so rare, and I don't think Netflix is dropping those. So it's a kind of
good question.
Lost art form.
Well, I'm kind of glad it's gone.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll give you. Do you know that movie, that version?
No.
The 2005.
I've heard of it.
Keira Knightley, Pride and Prejudice. Okay, I'm gonna do a little spoiler, but it's not like, if you don't know the story of Pride and Prejudice, that's on you anyway. So, there was this one scene where Mr. Collins was up speaking in front of a congregation, and he said the word intercourse, and then he got nervous and corrected himself and said the intercourse. And I'm like, wait a minute, why are you ashamed of using the word intercourse? It wasn't used in sexual reference at that time. That's a totally modern reference to use intercourse as a sexual concept. Before, it's just two people talking to each other was considered an intercourse. It was just any interaction you had was intercourse. And so there are little things like that where I'm like, oh gosh, it was anachronistic, and I love the version. I will still watch it when I want a quick fix of Pride and Prejudice, but I will always watch the 1990s 5-hour version with Colin Firth before I'll watch that one.
That director's cut really got to you. Have
did.
You ever watched, is there any director's cut for Big? Or are you not going there?
No.
You're not going down that road?
I've never looked for that. That's such an interesting idea. Now I'm going to have to go look that one up.
Well, when your crush started to develop after watching Big on Tom Hanks, did you immediately go to the store and rent whatever else his face was on the cover of, like Splash and Bachelor Party, or were you like, nah, I'm gonna stick with Big. I like him in this.
Not intentionally, but well, my parents at the time, because I was still pretty young when that came out. I was about 8 when that came out. But my parents had no limitations on what we could watch, so it was no big deal for them for us to watch Splash, or for us. So I just inevitably kept building on to his already great repertoire of movies, because it was just par for the course. It was my parents let us watch whatever, and it was Tom Hanks. So I was like, yeah, heck yeah.
And I mean, he was in so much, like the early 90s, like he was in Bam, Bam, Bam. You had like Sleepless in Seattle. Like it was really hard to not watch a Tom Hanks movie in the early 90s, even the late 90s.
It's really true. I mean, and not just like he's been really consistent, because he was in The Burbs, and oh gosh, That Thing You Do. That I was 16 when that came out, and I'm like, oh, I love that movie. Totally adore him in that.
One of the best fake songs from a band ever.
No joke. It was fantastic. But then he just kept going. I mean, of course, we watched Dragnet when I was a kid, and there were a few we didn't ever see, but like Joe versus the Volcano, I saw that one. I don't think I ever saw Bachelor Party. But then as I was getting older, like I said, That Thing You Do was a big one. Turner and Hooch became one, The Money Pit. I mean, just so many of his movies that were iconic. And then of course, Toy Story came out. Now, Toy Story came out like a year before I had my first kid. And even my youngest children are all watching Toy Story like right now. We just finished watching the first 3 of those, and I think they may be watching the 4th one as we speak. Because Tom Hanks is just, he has touched on every part of who we want to be or want to have influence our lives.
Yeah, my friends over at An Evening at the Movies are doing a Tom Hanks like best movie bracket right now, and I was so mad that Toy Story got voted out. It was against like, I think it was against The Green Mile, which Green Mile, great movie, but I was like, that's not his movie though. When I think of Green Mile, I think of Michael Clark Duncan. When I think Toy Story, I think Woody. That is Tom Hanks. I was like so upset at this like bracket. I was like, you guys don't know movies.
Well, and even, oh man, one of my other big ones that I really loved about him was You've Got Mail. But even Philadelphia hit us in the gut when it came out. I mean, he's been a part of everything valuable in society for almost 4 decades.
Yeah, his career this year, 43 years acting. Isn't that wild? Wow. So for you, what are like your top 3 Tom Hanks, like not performances, but like characters that you just are like, oh, I wish I could be like with that person or just talk to that person?
Like know them, like get to know them person. Oh, that's such an interesting question. Well, let me back before I answer that question. I do want to say this. So I served in the Army back in the late 90s, and we were forced to watch Saving Private Ryan a ton.
Was it part of training or just they were like
no, it was kind of like, we're going to give you R&R and we're going to force you to watch the same movie over and over and over again. And it just happened that way. And I think we saw it like 7 or 8 times.
Wow.
It kind of wore on me, that particular movie. But I can look back now and recognize between so many of his different roles, including Green Mile, including Castaway, Saving Private Ryan, Sleepless in Seattle, he has just really hit every part of my whole life, like A League of Their Own. Okay, so to answer your question, if I could meet his character, oh man, this is awesome. This is such a good question. As an adult, probably not the character from Big.
Yeah.
As an adult, I would love to know Forrest Gump. The Da Vinci Code, everything from the Da Vinci Code was just so clever. I love intelligent people, so that was huge. I don't know. See how I'm falling into the more of the like serious characters? I think it's kind of definitely Mr. Rogers. And yeah, probably That Thing You Do. That Thing You Do. Oh man, this is a hard question to answer.
Well, I would definitely want to meet Mr. Rogers. That is one of my crushes, one of my loves of my life. He's such an amazing human being.
So good. And so real and so honorable. Like nothing he did was like took away from his honor. He was just
Mhm.
such a good man.
Like, I feel Mr. Rogers in the age of social media would have been what social media needed to not be so strange. So,
Yeah.
I feel like the toxic parts of social media would not exist if Mr. Rogers existed in the same time. And it's too bad that, he's gone now, but he would be like a million years old. So it would be kind of weird. Can you imagine
Yeah,
him doing
yeah.
TikToks at 99 years old? No.
I could totally I could totally imagine him doing that.
Like a dance or something with like the in the imagination land. That'd be weird to make
Well,
believe.
but they kind of did continue it, which was really good.
Mhm.
They brought in the little cartoon that my kids love, who's the name I'm totally
Uh,
forgetting right now.
Daniel.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I actually I did not put that was like a Mr. Rogers spinoff till I went and saw this artist perform, and they kind of started their show like Mr. Rogers, and it was dedicated to his daughter who he loved Mr. Rogers, she loved Daniel the tiger, so they bonded. So I was like, that's what that show is. I
It
thought
took it took me a while too. Like I didn't catch it right away. It took until after I watched the movie.
You're like, oh. So back to the roles. For me, a role choice can really mess up a crush if like one of my favorites does something I'm like, oh, that was embarrassing. Has that ever happened for you with Tom Hanks?
I would say no, mostly because I have a pretty down to earth understanding. Like, if he does something that, like, politics was really strong in my home growing up. So, if he did something that was politically questionable, for example, Philadelphia, um, I could recognize that that was just a role that he was like, I didn't take that and put anything for or against him on that. It was just another role in my head. Even though it was strongly political in a time where homosexuality and AIDS was just not, it's just not acceptable, right? That era for us, even though, I mean, I grew up in Los Angeles, I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, so it was all around me. It never affected me the way that it affected a lot of other people, but in my home and my family growing up, that was not necessarily the case, where my parents might have had an issue with that. Now, did they ever watch it? I doubt it. I doubt they ever put those two together, just because it was not in their purview for what they would watch. But I would say that any of the roles that he has played that were questionable, I just kind of like stepped away. I didn't really it's kind of like what I was saying earlier. I don't want to know these other parts of this person. I just kind of ignored them. I did watch Philadelphia though, and I did really enjoy it, but that was just an example of kind of where that would have been in my growing up years.
Mm-hmm. And is there a movie that you feel he didn't do, but like you watched it and you're like, Tom Hanks would have been so much better in this?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question.
Because I play pretend casting director all the time.
Do you? I don't think I've ever really done that. Oh, I feel like I have one, but I can't think of what it is off the top of my head. You know how it's just kind of in the back, you let it go because it's never getting remade. There's only total change of topic for a second. Harry Potter is the only place I've ever really casted people where I was like, this is what needs to be casted here.
Okay.
Like Angelica Houston for the French school's headmistress.
Okay.
That should have been Angelica Houston. Greg Kinnear should have been Professor Lockhart. There were a number of others, but that was the only place I've ever really consciously done it. But now that you're saying that, I'm totally going to watch movies now and have Tom Hanks in my head. Like, yeah, he would have totally done this better.
Oh yeah, Harry Potter I feel is one of the most like fan recasted. That one, you think like if they made Star Wars today, who would be in it? I like seeing who people would like if Marvel was made in the 90s, who would people play?
Totally. The other I just had it in my head and then it went away. You said something and it triggered a thought, and then I lost that thought apparently. Okay. Apparently he's gonna be. Oh, I was gonna tell you, Harry Potter is being remade into a series, a 7-season series.
Yeah, is it Prime or HBO? I mean HBO probably,
I
because
don't
they own
know.
the. I think it's HBO. They own the rights, I think. But yeah, very interesting. I always thought when I actually didn't watch Harry Potter until I think 2020 or whenever HBO Max was like, here you go or something. But my husband loves it. So he's like, we have to watch them all. And I watched them and what I really wanted was like more of like the school like drama because I like Degrassi. So I was like, I'd rather it just be like screw, the magic. I'm just like, who's dating who? What's the drama? What's the tea? That's what I wanted the series to be.
That's hilarious.
Because
I
I
think
really,
it'd be really fun. I can't wait to see what they do with it.
yeah, it should be interesting. And it's just another generation, maybe. Because my nephew, he went to Universal Studios for the first time. And I was like, oh, how'd you like it? He was like, Harry Potter World? That's a big no. I'm like, okay, not for him.
What?
Okay. Yeah, he was not, but he's like, he's what, 11? And he really likes The Simpsons. So it's not against something that's older and not for him. He just not his cup of tea. I was like, oh,
Oh,
right.
interesting. I didn't read much in high school. I think like 3 books. I just didn't care. And it wasn't until my early 20s and it was just before the fourth book came out and I became obsessed with Harry Potter. But it's also because I share his birthday.
Okay.
And I share the authored character like he was born literally on the same day as me, July 31st, 1980.
Oh.
And I love that I had that connection. So I became kind of obsessed with Harry Potter, went to every book release and every movie release and all it just because that was my thing. That became my thing.
Well, that's it. Tom Hanks should have been in a Harry Potter.
He should have been. Who would he have played really well? Oh, you know who he could have played really well? That would have been really fun to see him in is Mad Eye Moody.
Mad Eye Moody.
I think he could have played Mad Eye Moody awesome. And it would have really challenged his acting. Do you remember that character?
No.
Okay, so Mad Eye Moody is in the fourth book. He has this eyeball in his head that spins around and he can see things. He can like see through things, so you can see all this stuff. And he walks with a cane. And what's really happening is, and spoiler for anybody who hasn't seen it in the last 20 years, he was actually, somebody was using polyjuice potion on him, and he was stuck in a magical trunk for the majority of the entire year in the fourth year. So he's the one who like went through the Goblet of Fire and stuff with Harry. And was like, so the guy who was faking it, who ended up being played by Doctor Who, David Tennant. He was the bad guy who was using the polyjuice potion, but that character was going through kind of easing the way for Harry to get through the Goblet of Fire competitions for nefarious purposes, but that was what he was doing.
I'm looking it up. The eye is really creepy.
It's awesome. So I highly recommend looking at a few scenes with Mad Eye Moody and just kind of putting Tom Hanks in there. It would be really fun to see how he would have altered that character all through the film. It would have been awesome. And for a couple of films, I think he got all the way through to the 6th book.
Well, HBO, if you're listening and you need someone for the series and Tom Hanks isn't busy, maybe you cast him.
That would be awesome.
So Tom Hanks is your nice guy crush because every single time there is a nicest celebrity list, he's on it. Would it break your heart to then meet him one day? You said you don't want to meet your heroes like that, but no, would you risk Tom Hanks?
I would. I think I would risk Tom Hanks because he's he's been pretty consistent in his overall behaviors. You know how you see an actor and you're like, oh, they're awesome. They're in the industry for 10 years and then they start like getting into drugs and getting into all these different things that ruin their lives. And maybe and like Robert Downey Jr. is a great example. It just screwed everything up until he finally went into recovery and really took it seriously. I would have a very hard time, having met RBJ back in the 80s when I, like Only You and stuff like that came out. And now I see him and I'm like, I would meet him because he's been able to prove himself for many, many years, that he has gotten out of just being shallow and stuff. So I think Tom Hanks is one of those men in Hollywood who has really stayed out of the things that could ruin his life. And so I would be honored to meet him, but I'd meet him as an equal now. I wouldn't be meeting him as somebody that I just, oh, I'm so starstruck over you. I would just be completely comfortable sitting in a room with him and just having a real conversation.
You mentioned Robert Downey Jr. and all that, and he definitely, I mean, the 80s was a wild time for Hollywood and celebrities. It was hard to make it out of there unscathed. He did, but I think another part of his niceness comes from when he came to fame, though. Like, there wasn't social media and this constant, like, magnifying glass on celebrities, because while, like, tabloids existed, I think they weren't close to what they are now. It was kind of like if we saw them out once in a while. Now it's like, oh, look at them every second of the day. So really, the only way we knew them back then was through these roles, like you said, and like chosen interviews if we wanted to watch them. Do you think Crushing on in the 80s and the 90s somewhat more innocent then because of the lack of social media?
Gosh, everything is more innocent back then because of the lack of social media. Our modern, I mean, just we go on to social media and all we see is the good. We either see the good, or really what it is people only show what they want us to see. So when you're seeing something from somebody, so I know a number of people who have mental health issues, and they go out and they're like talking all about the big negative because of their mental health, but without realizing for 1 second that they're depending on the attention they get from that, which is part of the mental health problem, right? So then other people, all you see is this perfect, happy life. There's no realism and there's no moderation with social media. You don't see people's everything. You can't see people's everything because that's kind of limited to people you know closely anyway. So I think that social media has really damaged. I think it's one of the huge contributors to the mental health crisis we're facing today.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I always think, like, what if there was a tech apocalypse and social media went down? How long would we survive? I'm like, I'm waiting for it. Even though I rely on the internet for just about every aspect of my life, I'd still like to see it burn.
I agree. And I depend on it. I use it all the time. I'm on TikTok all the time. My company depends on social media. I do public speaking. I do so many of these other things, these leadership training, these different things that I do. I depend on social media. But man, I wish I didn't have to.
Yeah.
I would love to just depend on my merits and my quality and my humanity and my goodness.
I interview a lot of musicians for a website, and I asked, they're just like, we just want to make the music. We don't want to have to make the videos on the Instagram. We don't have to do reels and all this stuff. Yeah, we just want to post our music. Yeah, it's double-edged sword. So
it really is.
We can't talk about Tom Hanks without talking about his wife, Rita Wilson, married since 1988 and still going strong. That's a rarity in Hollywood, but it also goes hand in hand with this man probably being so amazingly nice, like we said. When it comes to marriage, do you think him and Rita are, as the kids say, #goals?
Yes, I absolutely do. You know that they've faced crazy things in their life. That transition into social media, all of his films, the relationships that have to be developed in the industry in order to survive. They've dealt with really hard things and things that smartly we don't know about because a good couple in Hollywood doesn't talk.
Yeah, like I don't even know if I knew who, like, they were married. I knew like them separately, and I don't think I knew they were married for the longest time.
And they're absolutely #goals. Like I said, I've been married 3 times. Longevity is not my issue. I will fight and fight and fight to have a marriage work, but there's only so much you can do with the things that I've dealt with. And I look at them and just think it is possible. It's hard, it is possible. And I think it's just beautiful that they have lasted all this time. And she's gorgeous and they've both aged perfectly. Just wonderful, wonderful couple. I want to know their secret. But again, that's part of the whole point of them not being public with their information.
I think that's the secret. Keep the
Yeah.
secret.
Yeah. The
And
privacy.
yeah, would you say your crush, Tom Hanks is still going strong today, or have you kind of replaced him with a new nice guy, new kind of unique looking dude?
I'm so opposed to relationships right now after my third divorce. I'm like, no, I'm really good. Like, it's nice. I like looking at people from a distance. Like, I'll go somewhere where I know there's going to be really attractive men, or I'll watch a movie where I know their personality is what I like. But then I'm like, okay, you just stay on that side of the screen. You stay on that side of the room. I want nothing to do with crushing or anything like that. I would say Tom Hanks, I don't really have the kind of crush on him, but I would be honored to meet him. I think the problem with crushes, for me, and I don't know how true this might be for others, is that a crush is put on a pedestal. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe in pedestals anymore. Where before, Tom Hanks was absolutely, I would have totally fangirled him. But he's not, because he's just a human. He's just a dude.
I think that comes with age too, though, because the older you get, you're like, well, if I meet this person, I'm not gonna be like a 12-year-old. It just depends on the person too. Like if I saw Jonathan Taylor Thomas from like Home Improvement out in the wild, I'd probably revert back to being 8. But then if I see, somebody from The Office or Frasier, I'd be excited, but I think I could hold it together. So I think it depends on where the crush lies in my life.
That's funny you say Jonathan Taylor Thomas. He was one of the great examples of finding out that somebody was really a jerk.
Oh, is he mean?
Oh,
well, I mean, I don't know anything about him. He's kind of just weird.
He just had a really bad attitude. It was one of the reasons I never really, but I never really have okay, so I'll tell you a story. You remember New Kids on the Block?
Mm-hmm.
My sister was absolutely obsessed. She's a few years older than me, and she had the chance to like go to their concert, but she went out of her way to be like, oh, he gave me roses. She was just trying to impress the people who treated her badly at school, and like made up a bunch of stories about how when she went to the NKOTB concert, they were like, they liked her and she met them and all that stuff. And it was not true. But I never understood, and maybe it was because I was at the right age. I was like 7 or 8 when that happened. I was at this perfect age where watching her do that and feel like she had to impress her friends and her school companions was like, I didn't care. I saw that. It does not, like, I don't care. So I think that transition into, I never really fangirled over anybody. I did crush on Tom. I crushed on, oh man, Martin Short. Steve Martin and Martin Short, but really Martin Short. There was something about him that just, it might have just been as simple as he had the quirkiness, he had that natural humor, but real quirky, and maybe I always wanted to be spontaneously funny and I wasn't. And so I don't know, maybe that was all it was. But I never did understand that whole really crushing on, and especially people my age. I never got that. Like Jonathan Taylor Thomas, I never even saw him as anything. Even the Hanson brothers, none of it. I just didn't. I didn't know the difference between who was the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. I still don't. I'll be honest. I don't know who is like. Yeah, you look at some of those singers, and I'm like, which group were you with? I don't know. I just never got into that fangirl mode.
That's understandable. You had a more realistic approach to life.
Yeah.
I guess true. You didn't get the fangirl gene.
I'll let others have that. I'm totally good.
I think your sister, maybe it was like, there's also like just wanting to be the opposite of your sibling. My little brother's like that. Like I'm really nerdy and into school, and he's really like, I don't want to be a nerd like her. So he was really rebellious. So I don't know if it's like because he didn't want to be like me, and I'm like, okay, what's wrong with liking school? It's fun. And he's like, it's dumb. So I kind of see that as siblings too, because my older brother was really bad, and I'm the opposite of him, and then my brother's the opposite of me. So.
I have, you mentioned I have 7 children. My kids span from 4 to 22. And they are, you might even hear them screaming right now. It's possible because they're downstairs screaming right now. Because that's what they do when they're both angry and happy. But every single one of those kids has a completely unique and different personality. I have one in the Air Force. I have one in, it was just a lazy kid, but so sweet, right? Like such a nice kid, but lazy as all get out. I have one who's just completely stuck on on drama and attention. It's just every kid is so different. And I think that our relationships with our siblings influence that, but I think we have a foundational part of our DNA that is already there. Like it wouldn't matter. It's kind of like no matter what I did, no matter what my mother did, I was still going to resent her for, she could have been the things that I wish she were, right? But I'd probably still have found something to resent about her. And my kids are going to be the same way. The ones who are going to resent me are going to resent me no matter what. I could be totally the nicest, most understanding, or I could be the most disciplinarian. It doesn't matter. They're going to find something because that's just part of who they are and part of life and part of how we grow up.
Definitely. Like, I think you're always going to find a reason to be upset with your parent at some point in your life. Like my husband goes through that. He's like, was a mama's boy and was like really angry with his dad because his job was the reason they had to move when he was in 5th grade. But now he's more close with his dad as an adult and kind of is like, with his mom. Kind of flip-flops depending on where you are. But yeah, I see that. You also mentioned Steve Martin, a hottie for life. That guy. I fell in love with Father of the Brides at an age I shouldn't have. I think I was 7, 8 years old.
No joke. Like freaking hilarious.
George Banks, always and forever. Like everyone's like, what? And I'm like, watch that. He's so endearing in that movie. He's so handsome. And then once I got the internet and could Google what he looked like in like the 70s, I was like, give me a time machine because I'm going back. If I can get SNL, Steve Martin, I'd be a happy girl. So you're like, don't want relationships. So usually at the end of the crush part, I ask like, what do you imagine your life with them like? But we could just skip that because you don't want to be in a relationship. You want that drama. Even
We'd
with
Tom Hanks. Yeah. Our life together would be, hey, I just had a really good idea for a book. Can I throw it at you? And he's like, sure. And he reads it. He's like, that's horrible. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. It's okay. Next week I'll have another one. Right? Like we would just be buddies. We would be the people who would just chat and laugh over stupidity and influence the world for good, because that's what it's all about. Like everything is about this big picture where I want to look back from my deathbed and know that I made a difference in somebody's life, even if it's just one person. But really, I hope it's more than that. I hope I have a strong enough influence to really help the world. Well,
you have 7 kids, so that's 7 people already.
I think of people like Tom Hanks, and I think I would work well beside somebody like that to accomplish that simple goal, just to make the world a better place, and not one concept at a time, not environmentalism and not mental health and all, but kind of all of it. There has to be a foundational idea that could change the world more than attacking one little thing at a time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what that thing could be.
Well, I think I figured it out, but I could be wrong. My program is called Love Centered Life, and basically it's this simple. I teach people how to love themselves well enough that they can help other people be better love-centered leaders in their homes, their communities, and their employment. So I teach people, like, first thing you have to do is know who you are, love you, choose you. But it doesn't do any good to be selfish with that. You have to be selfless with it. Once you figure that out, that's where you point the direction back out and you let that light that you finally created in yourself shine and change the world. And you help people to just love, to be kind, to be patient, to stop competing with one another, to stop arguing over stuff that's pointless, to stop rejoicing in things that are negative, like, oh, I just went out and got drunk and got plastered and some chick hit on me and I just totally blew her out of the water. Like, ha ha ha, funny, funny. No, not finding funny in that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when somebody does that, say, yeah, that's not really funny. And they're like, well, I was just joking. No, you're really not just joking. That was rude. That was not kind. That was not loving. That was not patient. That was not anything. So we have this tendency to just find humor in things that really should not be humorous. And then we don't find the joy in things that are really meant to be joyful.
Have you ever watched The Bad Side of the 90s or Dark Side of the 90s on Hulu?
No, what is that?
It's a docu-series. It's really interesting. It goes with what you're saying. You're saying stop arguing, stop rejoicing in the negative, but a lot of it kind of tells the story in a way that's like in the 90s we kind of got more cynical. And then it always, for some reason, every 90s documentary I've watched, even the one about Barney the dinosaur, it's very good, by the way, shout out, is all goes to Jerry Springer and how it was this like craziness and just the wildness, and we love the spectacle, and how that is kind of the foundation for what reality TV became, and then the social media. So it's really interesting. I advise check it out.
I will.
The one
It
about
looks like it just came out a couple of years ago.
yeah, it's really good, and the Barney doc. It's that you think you're like, what is this going to be about? And you're like enthralled. But so when did
that's hilarious?
Yeah, it's really good. So when did love-centered life start to come together for you? Like when did it all start?
So in 2021, I started a new wonderful job at an amazing hospital in Kansas. And I had one of the best supervisors I've ever had, just one of the sweetest men. And I was able to kind of look back at all my previous supervisors that I really appreciated and the ones I didn't so much, and see this one tendency. And I try not to make it religious, but really it comes down to the historical concept of 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7, which is love is kind, it suffereth long, it's envieth not, it vaunteth not itself, and be non-competitive. It doesn't rejoice in iniquity, it rejoiceth in truth. So this whole set of scriptures, it hit me one day. I just was reading them kind of randomly, and I said, oh wait, that's this supervisor. That's what he does. Like, you know, when you're in trouble and like, you know, you're about to be in trouble and you're really scared to go in and talk to your boss. But there are those bosses who like pull you in. They're like, I need to talk to you about this. But you come out of it like, I mean, that wasn't so bad. I can fix that. That was really easy to fix. That was him. And it was just like feeling peace. Peace is the only emotion that cannot be counterfeit. And I highly recommend anybody look up Curtis Morley. He created a concept called counterfeit emotions, and he talks about all emotions and how you have these two emotions. Joy and happiness are two different emotions, but they're one is counterfeit of the other, and it's about going in the right direction with the feeling. Anger and I think it's being mad. You'd have to look, but the concept's brilliant. And the idea behind it is that peace is the one emotion you can have that can never be counterfeit. Anywhere else in your life, you can't feel anything else that feels like peace. It's the only one of its kind. And when you have a good leader, when you have a good parent, when you have a good boss, when you have a good political leader, like a local councilman or something like that, a good police officer, when you're feeling peace around them or peace within yourself, while you're affecting the world on your own, that can't be replaced with anything else. So if you can grasp that, then you can kind of turn around and say, oh, this is what love-centered means, because the goal is to find peace with who you are and to find that one thing that can't be counterfeit. Is it easy? Heck no. It's probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to try and create curriculums based on, because I do leadership training for companies with that leadership idea in mind. But it is one of the hardest things to come back and say, I've been in, like, my third marriage was my hardest. I was massively emotionally abused. I wasn't perfect, but I really, really gave my all as a wife, and I did everything I could to make it a happy marriage. And so I'm developing this concept, and within a few weeks of finding that idea of being inspired by that idea, I filed for divorce.
Mm-hmm. Well, good for you.
Thank you. It took 2 years to finalize, but it's done. And as I finally separated from him, and I lived on my own, and I'm going through, I mean, massive emotional, trying to like heal from all of this nonsense I dealt with, like feeling totally invalid and feeling worthless all the time, no matter what I was doing. Mind you, I had 4 children in 5 years. I had 2 pregnancies that miscarried in that time. I got my associate's, bachelor's, and master's degrees in 4.5 years while giving birth to my last 2 children. I had no reason to feel worthless. I was great at everything I touched, but in my marriage, I was worthless.
I was just trying to do, like, you know, that GIF or meme where they're doing the math and all the. I'm like, what? Master's, a bachelor's, what? 4 years of kids? You're insanely crazy dedicated.
It was so. I didn't understand then. It took my separation to finally look back and say, I was feeling worthless because of the man that was influencing me. Mm-hmm. And I allowed that to influence me. And trying to overcome that, though, creating the idea, like understanding the concept of setting boundaries, understanding that what overthinking looks like, understanding that I am worth more than the people I attract, because the people that I attract are giving me their bare minimum, and I'm worth more than that. And there's just a lot. And so over the course of the last 2 years, as I've developed this program and try to figure out how to organize it in a way that will help the most people, but at the same time is within my capacity. Mm-hmm. It has been the hardest thing. I mean, I still deal with the weaknesses. This doesn't make you perfect. It just gives you tools to try with, to try and be better, to be kind, to be a better person, to find that peace within yourself. So, to wrap that up, it was just a totally inspired concept. And I do feel that if we could, it's not just everybody love one another and everybody this, it's knowing what the heck that means. It's not just about accepting everything. You can't just accept everything. If I did, that's why I married the men I married. You have to know yourself and your worth. And if you can do that, if I can look at somebody like Tom Hanks, for example, and not look up to him, but look at him as an equal, where I'm not feeling worthless just because I'm imagining somebody who could legitimately be a part of my life, then that's the goal. It's to find your own worth and then let that light shine elsewhere. That doesn't mean you accept everything. You know where your boundaries are. You know where your peace is.
I like that. Don't look up to, look at. Just write that down. That's a good thing. I like that. You said you were like emotionally abused, and your services, you do help people. You said you do the business, you like go to companies, but you also do individuals, couples, and abused victims. Is it ever daunting to work with people who you know they're like what they're going through firsthand?
Oh yeah, it's one of the hardest things, and it's actually I've actually gotten to a point where I'm teaching other people how to coach my program, just so I don't have to do it. It drains me, and mostly that's because of what I've been through. That I have a very hard time being up close and personal in other people's lives. I had the answers, but it's just a little bit too hard for me to individually coach people. So I have a program that I coach. I teach people how to be coaches so that they can come in and teach the program.
Are they like part of your company, or they go out on their own?
Well, they can go out on their own. They just, they're basically contracted with me, and I get just, recognition and a small portion of what they bring in because they're using my platform.
Gotcha. And you boast about this like importance of self-love and how and when to love yourself, but like as a lifelong student of that and of everything, you have a master's, bachelor's degree, all doctorate, all this at this point. When did you start to realize that you needed to like love yourself?
Honestly, within the last year and a half.
Oh wow.
The concept was born for businesses. But as I was building it for businesses, I began to realize that this was more than just about companies. Good leadership needed to be for fathers and mothers, older siblings. It needed to be for people in school and for people in leadership positions in the community. I mean, knowing your worth changes how you lead. And you can lead as a fry cook or a CEO. It's irrelevant what position you hold, you can still be a good leader. So as I was developing that concept, I realized you can only love others to the extent that you love yourself. And the minute I had a friend, I have two friends that I'm very close to, but one doesn't like the other. The other one doesn't know the other as well. But so my girlfriend would tell me, he's doing this guy over here in your life is doing this. And one of the things that she said was, he is extremely hypercritical. And within a week, I happened to be at his house. We were chatting, we were talking, and I told him, I said, you can only love others to the extent that you love yourself. And he's like, I don't believe that.
Jeez.
He started to go on with this hypercriticism. And I'm like, oh, how interesting. God put that together on purpose. I really believe that there was no coincidence in the timing of this communication, because I was able to look at him, not only verify that you can only love others to the extent that you love yourself, but watch it in action as this guy was critical of both myself and himself. Even though we're friends, like we're close, that's who he is. That's his nature, is to be hypercritical. He doesn't see it. He doesn't recognize it. Even if I pointed it out, I think he would totally disregard it.
Is he a bit of like a contrarian, would you say?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think everyone has at least one of those friends where you're like, oh. Or if you invite him, you're going to have to hear like a 10-minute rant on their trip there. Parking, the weather, you're just like, all right, I'm in for it. Okay, but they can make life fun too. But you got things pretty set up with your business. You just mentioned that you're bringing on others to learn the teachings and go out and do it themselves and coach. But are there any plans of expanding beyond what you already have at the moment? Because you mentioned like leadership is in all different things. I think especially in schools, this would be something really good, especially since COVID and mental health is down with our children right now. It is insane. I think this would be something that would benefit kids, even if it was just like an elective they had to take, Oh,
that's an interesting idea. You mean putting it in schools like for a class? That's a good idea. So the program of Love-Centered Life is actually divided into 4 sections. There's Love-Centered Self, Love-Centered Homes, Love-Centered Connections, which is our social life, and then Love-Centered Leadership, which I also call Centered Leadership, which is that's a very corporate side of thing. That's there's a lot there. But I help people with like HR consulting, but a lot of that is I'm going to help them rewrite their resumes. I'm going to help them with interview skills. I'm going to give them tools that they can go off and find work with, simultaneously to learning how to be a better leader. So it's already kind of divided into those sections. I mean, even part of the Love-Centered Connections is Dungeons and Dragons, because I'm a total geek and I love D&D, and it's teaching people how to be good DMs and use love-centered leadership as a but it's really broad. I really want to be able to help felons who get back on their feet. I want to help women who've gotten out of bad marriages to get back on their feet. We're so fast, and I mean, I did it, so I know we're so quick to jump back into other relationships because we don't know our worth. So we're accepting the way people treat us, the way we've always been treated. We are going to attract the people who will love us as we see ourselves. So imagine how hard it must be to love yourself so much that you're not in a relationship because you just know your worth more.
I like the felon thing too. My older brother, one I didn't want to be like. That's what he just got out and trying to rebuild his life. And hopefully, I think if he got something like this, well, maybe he'll stay out this time. Maybe it seems like maybe this is the time. Fingers crossed.
So let's pray. But yeah, there's so much. And I think people like Tom Hanks, like the movies that we grew up with, really the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s movies were so fabulous for teaching foundational principles. In in a light where now that would be looked at as like there's no way things are really that happy. But I think having movies that taught us that we could be that happy were good. Like I think that was a good thing for us with so many broken homes. I think that was a valuable tool to us.
I just was watching Little Big League the other night, and it had like several very lengthy montages, and I was like, I think the world got sadder when they took these montages out of movies because they're so dumb but so fun. They don't do anything to move the plot forward. It's just people like doing
they're just human and they're real, and I loved those.
Yeah.
Look at what was the movie? Little Rascals. Right? Like
so good.
How humble can you be, right? To do a movie completely just child-based. But those things existed more. Now where everything has to be dark and it has to be political and it has to be these things that are just gross and they make you feel gross. And guess what? When things feel that way, there's no peace. You have to be able to let that go and not live in it and find that peace.
Yeah, we need to bring the happy back into the world. It's been sad for too long. And you mentioned D&D. You should check out the Average Adventuring Party podcast. I just talked to their dungeon master, Gary, about his TV character Crush. And so they do their campaigns over the podcast, and it's pretty good.
What is that called? The Average Adventure?
The Average Adventuring Party podcast. It's a mouthful. But before we wrap up, can you remind people where they can find you and Love Centered Life online?
So Love Centered Life is on Facebook. You can find me. I'm also Beth Connor. So I welcome follows and message requests and kind of anything that I can help guide people through. But Love Centered Life is on Facebook. I'm on TikTok. It's at Stream of 1000 Things. So STREAMOF1000THINGS. Stream of 1000 Things. And my website is not strongly developed, so anybody who wants to volunteer to help that progress, that'd be great. But it's lovecentered.net. And I think that's pretty much it. I'm on Instagram, but I don't really do it. I'm on to the others. What are the others? Telegram and what's Twitter. TikTok. I'm on Twitter. I don't do that. So it's TikTok and Facebook for me.
Alrighty. Well, those are two big ones, so you're not missing out. I mean, Instagram's fun, but it's mostly I just like to scroll and like I'll send my husband funny videos and then we laugh together at night. But Beth, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about your nice guy crush and love and so much more with me today. And everyone, you can find all that information below. And until next time, as always, keep crushing it.